Andy made a preseason bold prediction about the number of SEC teams in the NCAA tournament. The only problem, my man, you aren't bold enough.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Monday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your host, that's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade, and we're glad you're joining us to get your week started the right way, where you get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch, and we want to remind you, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, where we're doing some fun stuff this offseason. Make sure you check in on that. This episode's brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Great stuff there. Coming up on the show today, we've had a couple more movements over the weekend. We had a big commitment from Nate Ament headed to Tennessee on Sunday and some other stuff. But Andy, it's time to look back at our bold predictions. This is something that has become an annual tradition for us right before the season begins. So back on Friday, November 1st, the Friday before the season started, we each made 3 bold predictions, guaranteed to be wrong, guaranteed to be long shots. And, that's what happened with some of them, but we got bits and pieces right. And so it's always fun. Another part of the tradition is to look back on how we did. So, Andy, I don't want to waste any time. I want to get right on into this. And we'll start in segment 1, where you and I each had something of an SEC prediction. We'll eventually, at the end of the show, get to some dueling Big Ten predictions. And then we had a nice mid-major prediction from you and a kind of out there Duke prediction from me. So, Andy, why don't you kick us off, though, and tell us about your historic SEC bold prediction?
Yeah, I predicted that the SEC was going to tie, and it's unfortunate that I used the word tie, because I said they were going to tie the record for the most teams from a conference in the Big Dance. That would be 11, which happened by the Big East back in 2011, and the SEC did not tie the record for the number of teams in the NCAA tournament. They blew it out of the water. They had 14 teams in the Big Dance. And we talked about when we had this conversation, and it was part of a conversation we had multiple times throughout the offseason last year, was that the kind of ballooning of power conferences combined with the money settles at the top for the SEC and the Big Ten. And we knew that was a big factor, that we were going to start to see conferences tend to be a bit, more conferences with 10 teams in the NCAA tournament, more with 11, more with 12 potentially. And so we talked about it with the SEC of thinking, well, they'll at least tie the Big East. And they ended up, again, like we said, beating it. Had 14 of their 16 teams. The only 2 teams that did not make it were LSU and South Carolina. An incredibly dominant performance from the SEC this season, not only in the regular season, but they also did great in the NCAA tournament. And that was another part of this prediction. Before I get to before my head balloons up with success of getting this prediction right, I did also predict that only one SEC team will advance to the Elite Eight. That ended up being very incorrect in the sense that 4 teams from the SEC actually advanced to the Elite Eight. So was not correct about that. I'm happy to say, however, that especially at the time, this was a bolder prediction that it ended up being, that the only team I thought would make the Elite Eight or farther from the SEC would be Florida. Florida, of course, not only one of the 4 teams that did make the Elite Eight, they were the team that ended up holding the trophy at the end of the year. So happy to have been in on Florida right at the start of the season. Happy to have been in on the SEC having this kind of dominant season. Wish I'd leaned into it a little bit more. Anybody would have been looked at insane for saying 14 teams from the SEC are going to make the NCAA tournament. But here we are. And really, I think the proof was pretty obviously there that they all deserve to be there. It was an incredibly dominant conference this past year, and fun to see most of this thing come together the way that it did.
Yeah, Andy, it's always fun. As I took my post-Easter Sunday nap on Sunday afternoon, I went back and listened to this show, and it was funny because you literally said, after you made your prediction, you said, I wrote the quote down. I was close to saying they would break the record, and honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if that happens either, and they get a full 12 in. So I wish you would. I'm with you. I'm like, man, I wish Andy had gone through it, but it's fine. But yeah, I mean, to your point about now the Florida prediction doesn't look all that bold, but preseason, let's remember, it was either Kansas or Alabama for number one preseason. I'm looking at it right now. The next SEC team was Auburn at 11, Tennessee 12, A&M 13, Arkansas 16, and then you got to go all the way down to Florida at 21 before you get to that. So look, let's not retroactively say, oh, picking Florida as that's not that, but it is bold. They were
wants to know how bold it is. Go read the YouTube comments on that video. People were not happy about predicting Florida to have a good season. It turns out
and that's how you know it's an accurately bold prediction, is when everyone in the comments is like, you guys are idiots and you're dumb and you don't know what you're talking about. Good. Then we were bold enough, right? And I love, Andy, that part of it came to fruition. So on my one of my bold predictions was also in the SEC, and it's one that, Andy, we actually don't know with certainty the answer to yet. And my bold prediction was this: that for the first time since the 2009 NBA draft, the Kentucky Wildcats will not have any first-round NBA draft picks. Now, the result of that, if I was right or wrong, is TBD. But Andy, I think as we sit here on Monday, April 21st, that looks like it's going to come true. And like, maybe not even have any Wildcats drafted is a possibility. Maybe that would have been the bolder thing to say there. But like, and I think I said it in that show. Like, I'm just baffled that from 2010 on, every NBA draft has had a Kentucky Wildcat in the first round. Like, that is mind-boggling. Yeah. The consistent success that Coach Cal had with getting one of his players into that first round. And I mean, it really does look like that's probably not going to happen again this year. We'll obviously wait to see. I haven't even looked up the date of the draft, but yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think the craziest part about all of this is absolutely the fact that John Calipari had a first round pick for like over a decade straight. That's absolute insanity. And I think, you know, at the time that this prediction was made, there wasn't anybody super obvious in the first round conversation, but it was like, well, somebody's going to pop, somebody's going to step up. And Jackson Robinson was kind of hey, he could be a fringe first round guy, definitely at least going to be a second round guy. Like, if you'd predicted nobody's going to get drafted, people would have been like, well, Jackson Robinson's going to get drafted, or, you know, maybe somebody else will step up from that team. But yeah, I think at this point, the injury obviously is a big factor for Robinson, and his age was already going to be working against him. Guys like Lamont Butler, Kirk Risa, you know, they're just not big enough, or really NBA type players in the modern era. I think Otega Owe is the player to keep an eye on here in terms of being a draft pick from Kentucky if he does want to go pursue the draft and decides to stay in that process. But I don't see him being a first round pick. Like, I think that would be surprising if he were able to do that. So, you know, you look at the rest of the team, and again, very, very talented. With a lot of great players on this roster, but Mark Pope, he wasn't going after players based on their NBA pedigree. He was trying to build a roster that would fit his style, and I think he did a phenomenal job of that. And I think you saw the success that this team had without any returning players, without any roster continuity, in the toughest conference we've seen in a really long time. Like, I think that the Mark Pope story was one of great success, even though I think it is as you have said multiple times, very unlikely to lead to Kentucky having a first-round pick. So I feel pretty confident in saying that you're going to be right about this, as confident as anybody can predict the NBA draft. It's always, you never really know what's going to happen. But right now, there's certainly not anybody from that team last year that is trending towards being particularly close to being a first-round pick this year.
Yeah, it's like, who knows what franchise is going to take a shine to Owe or something, be like, hey, let's get him 20th, you know? So I don't know. We'll see what happens there, Andy. But yeah, that first round I went and looked while you were talking, Wednesday, June 25th at 7 p.m. Remember, starting last year, guys, they have now broken it up into 2 nights. So we'll get the first round on the 25th and the second round on the 26th. So stay tuned for all that. Obviously, Andy and I will be talking a ton between now and then about NBA draft, early entrants, who's deciding to stay in, who's coming back, all of that kind of stuff. We'll have that for you all summer long, Andy.
Well, Isaac, you also made a bold prediction about a Duke freshman, and not a Duke freshman named Cooper Flagg. And we're going to talk about how that prediction went coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, get the supplies that you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product information to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, so now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com.
This episode is also brought to you by our great friends at Monarch Money. Andy, I don't know about you, but have you ever looked at your bank account and you're like, where did all my money go? What happened to it? You guys ever struggle with that? Man, I certainly do. Well, look, sometimes it's like, well, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, we just are coming off of Easter. Maybe you had to go buy a pretty new Easter dress. Andy had to get a bow tie, whatever it is. It's easy to lose track of it all. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, and they give you full visibility and control over all your finances. And I like that Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and instead you start building wealth for yourself. And also, instead of having to juggle a whole bunch of apps, man, it's all right there in Monarch Money, where you can check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. My wife and I, we always want to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to finances. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner, it's smoother than ever before. And I love that because, man, that can really drive a wedge between you if it's not going. Well, you can track your shared accounts, you can track your personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. That's a great deal. Go check it out now.
All right, Isaac here, still continuing our conversation, looking at our bold predictions from way back on Friday, November 1st, just before the start of the 24-25 college basketball season. We talked about our bold predictions in the SEC, predicting how many teams they'd have in the NCAA tournament, predicting whether Kentucky will have a first-round pick. And now I want to take a look at a couple other predictions. We'll start with yours, Isaac. You had a prediction not about Cooper Flagg, but about one of the other Duke freshmen who was not nearly as heralded at the time as he ended up being. Can you talk to us about what you had predicted about Con Kneppel?
Yes. So my I guess biggest bold prediction coming into the season was that Con Kneppel, rather than Cooper Flagg, would be Duke's leading scorer for the season. And I think the reason I liked this one is because I feel like so often when we look at these like crazy heralded guys, it's always like, it's because they're a dominant scorer.
Right.
And with Cooper, I looked at it and I was like, yes, he is, but he is all of this. And that's what makes him such a dominant player. But I was like, I don't think a lot of people realize that yet. Whereas with Con, yes, he does a lot of that other stuff, but where he really, really shines is he's just a bucket, man. And I think people look at him and maybe undersell it. And Andy, I got to tell you, I got real happy because Con was the leading scorer in each of Duke's first two games. And I was like, let's go. And then it only happened 8 more times the rest of the season. So we finished things. Cooper Flagg is Duke's leading scorer at 19.2. Con Kneppel is the second leading scorer, but almost 5 full points behind him at 14.4. Con led Duke in scoring 10 times while Cooper did it 17 times. So Andy, look, I went out on a limb and I was wrong. I was wrong, and that's fine.
I like this prediction though, and I think it did a good job of selling that Con was more of a factor for Duke than I think a lot of people thought that he was going to be. Again, the Cooper Flagg being the player who leads Duke in every major statistical category, like that seemed even with the amount of hype that he was getting, which it was a lot. The hype train was full speed ahead even before the season started for Cooper Flagg. But I don't know that a lot of people thought he was going to do that. Points, rebounds, assists, steals, just an incredible for at the age that he was, where he should have still been in high school, to do that was unbelievable. But Con was a player who really was good right out of the chute. I mean, you mentioned he was their leading scorer in their first 2 games, but he was just such a steady excellent presence for Duke throughout the season. And even still, I mean, I read NBA draft, analysis, and I read, fan commentary on it all the time on like Reddit or Twitter or other places. And the amount of people who still kind of label Con Knipple as, oh, he's just like a catch and shoot guy. He can't do anything else. That is not true. Like if you watch Con, he's got gravity towards the rim. He uses his size really well. Yeah, he's probably going to struggle with like NBA level physicality as a defender. But for people to say, oh, he was a bad defender at Duke. No, he wasn't. He was a pretty good defensive player. He was a very good shooter, but he was also good at getting downhill at scoring. He was a good playmaker. Like he did so many things. And so I think a positive Con Knipple prediction may not have come true in part because Cooper was even better than advertised, which seems almost impossible to say at the time. But Con Knipple, even saying he was going to be their second leading scorer would have probably been a little bold, and you would have gotten that exactly right. So I love giving Con some love before the season. I think it paid off, even if this exact prediction didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely that Duke will have 3 players drafted in the top 10, if not like top 7 or 8. And Andy, that's bonkers to think about. And that's going to be an interesting storyline for us to talk about at some point before we get to your next bold prediction, is we've had several drafts in a row here with a lot of non-college players at the tip top. I think we're going to be flooded with college players making up maybe the entire top 10, if not 9 of it, and so when we get to post-draft commentary, it's going to be really interesting to see how that conversation goes.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I think, the larger part of that conversation will be about the freshman classes of the last couple. I mean, last year's freshman class just wasn't very strong, and this year's class much better. And I think that, when you look at the 7 or 8 freshmen or college players who are going to get drafted in the top 10 this year, they're mostly freshmen. Cooper, Con, Maluach, KJ, at VJ, like the Rutgers guys, like, it's going to be mostly freshmen, but I'm excited to see how that shakes out. One guy who could be drafted, could be going to Michigan.
Nice.
Right? It worked out. Yaxel Lendeborg. And Yaxel Lendeborg obviously committed in the transfer portal to Michigan. We're actually going to talk about Michigan a little bit later in the show, more segues there. But he was at UAB this past year. And my most recent prediction, or my next prediction that we want to talk about here, was about UAB, saying that the Blazers would win the American Athletic Conference and that they would be a Sweet 16 team, that this was a Cinderella team who's going to win a conference they're not expected to win. They're going to make a run in March. They're going to be a Cinderella. We didn't get any Cinderellas this year, and UAB was certainly not one of them because they did not make the NCAA tournament because they did not win the American Athletic Conference like I projected. They actually finished 3rd in the regular season, finished 2nd in the conference tournament. They did make the NIT, and they did make the Sweet 16 of the NIT. In fact, they actually made the Elite 8 and then lost in overtime. But I bring that up because while I did not get this prediction correct, and I'm not going to try to pretend that I didn't, but I did say that a lot of it was because of how good I thought Yaxel Lendeborg was going to be this past season, and he was awesome. The rest of UAB's roster wasn't that good, and frankly, I think the biggest miss in this prediction was less about UAB and more of like Memphis was a freight train who just dominated that conference and was a very, very good team, even getting into the NCAA tournament. But if Memphis hadn't been like that, maybe UAB could have done some damage. But Yaxel Lendeborg, he was awesome. He was fantastic in the regular season. Now he's transferred to Michigan. We'll see if he stays with Dusty May's club or if he ends up going into the draft process. I've already seen a lot of mocks that have him as a potential 2nd-round pick, even early 2nd-round pick because of his size, rebounding, 3-point shooting, all the stuff that he brings. But this UAB roster didn't quite come together the way they could have, and Memphis was awesome last year under Penny Hardaway, but the Yaxel Lendeborg hype was real, and he looked awesome.
Yeah, man, he did. And, I'm really curious to see if he sticks at Michigan or if he decides to stay in the draft. I know that will give Dusty May and staff heart palpitations over the next several weeks here. But, like what I love about these bold predictions is that while our intention is often like that they're so bold that they're going to be wrong, I like it when there is some truth in it, right? And so you mentioned about Yaxel, but look, UAB does finish 3rd in the American behind Memphis and behind North Texas. And they do finish as the runner-up in the American Conference Tournament, right? And so I think there's a lot to that. They make it to the Elite 8 of the NIT, lose in overtime to another great mid-major team from this year in UC Irvine. And so, I think there is some good love to be spread around there, Andy. And so, I just like it when we have these little nuggets of getting things correct, or at least sending people in the right direction with it, even if we're not exactly on the nose.
Well, Isaac, we talked about Michigan being a part of our future bold predictions. So we both made predictions about the Big Ten. One of us did quite a bit better with their prediction than the other. We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be a part of it without all the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app, they actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. So here's why I use Gametime. First, saving up to 60% buying last minute for sports, as well as concerts, comedy shows, theater, etc. Plus, their all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Tonight, Game 2, Pistons, Knicks, Madison Square Garden, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The get-in price right now, $267. See if the Pistons can potentially even up that series. Folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, Isaac, 2 more bold predictions, one by each of us made before the season here, both regarding the Big Ten. And we're going to start with yours because we just talked about Yaxel Lendeborg, who, of course, has committed to Michigan in the transfer portal. So let's talk about Michigan because you made a very, very, very solid, bold prediction about the Wolverines before the season. Talk to us about what that was.
Yeah, Andy. And if people are wondering, like, why did you guys both have Big Ten bold predictions about where teams would fall in the rankings? Well, part of this is we very intentionally don't talk to each other about our bold predictions beforehand because we don't want to influence it or hedge our bets or whatever. And so we just both ended up doing this, which is kind of cool. So I was pretty intrigued with Michigan's roster before the season. They were picked 9th in the preseason Big Ten media poll. And so my prediction was that Michigan, despite that, in Dusty May's first year, would win the Big Ten regular season and come away with that. I think, Andy, a lot of this was due to the fact that there was a lot of surely he's not going to start Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden together, right? And I was just like, but what if he did? And what if it worked because Danny Wolf is more than just a Vlad Golden type big? And so I think that's where the crux of this really came into play is that not only did they both start, it worked way better than I think any of us could have imagined it would have. And boy, was it fun to see throughout the season. Consequently, I didn't get it right. Michigan finishes tied for second, 3 games back of Michigan State. And part of that, though, was that they went on a 3-game losing streak to end the regular season.
It was crazy. They were 3 games back of Michigan State.
I know, because they were tied 3 games before that. So Michigan State cleaned up down the stretch and Michigan fell off, unfortunately. But they did end up winning the Big Ten tournament, just heading into Selection Sunday, the selection show there. And so, as we were just saying about some of the others, while the prediction itself wasn't right, there were some elements in it that led us in the right direction to Michigan being wildly better than a lot of people probably thought.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think there's a lot to this, to where Michigan was picked in the preseason. Obviously, a new coach coming in. I don't think there was a lot of skepticism about Dusty May as a coach. At least there shouldn't have been. He's obviously a very great coach. But it would have been reasonable if there was skepticism about Michigan's backcourt, because Michigan's backcourt was, I don't want to say bad. They certainly weren't bad, but they weren't great.
They weren't great.
They really weren't. And I think for Michigan, if you're like, oh, well, new coach, rough backcourt, I think, and also I think a lot of people were just expected more Big Ten teams to be better than they were. I think we saw 4. We kind of expected maybe there's gonna be 6, 7 really good Big Ten teams. There's more like 3 or 4, and then a lot of kind of pedestrian teams after that. And for Michigan, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden front court worked better than anybody could have possibly imagined, and Dusty May was able to coach his way to victories despite a backcourt that was, again, decent but not great by any stretch. And we just saw a team that did so much better in the regular season and had some moments in the NCAA tournament as well than I think a lot of people expected. And I have a feeling that's the last time that Dusty May is going to be discounted or picked against considerably in the preseason polls. I think that this Michigan team is going to be at or near the top for a long time, as long as he's there, because that first season, I think, quieted any of the remaining doubters. They're no longer talking after that.
Well, you know what's funny, Andy, is I actually am kind of selling Michigan ahead of next year. And so yeah. I'm like going to be the opposite of where I was this year, especially if Yaxel ends up deciding to stay in the draft.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing that we'll see there. Andy, I'm also reminded, as we're talking about the Big Ten here, that drought does indeed continue, where the Big Ten has still not won a national championship since 2000. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, crazy. So you predicted a Big Ten team that would finish in the top of the standings, and the consensus was that they'd finish in the middle of the pack. I predicted a team that was consensus way at the low end of the Big Ten standings. In fact, this team was projected to finish 14th out of 18 teams in the Big Ten. I projected they would finish top 3. The coaches were right. They finished exactly 14th, exactly where the coaches poll had them, not anywhere close to where I had them. This was far and away my biggest miss. Sorry, I'm no longer going to be a believer hopping on the must bus, no longer, because USC, I was intrigued. I was excited. I think maybe I put up too much stock, even though I know I said it on the show that I was trying not to put too much stock in their scrimmage result over Gonzaga, but I think I probably put a little bit too much stock in that. Desmond Claude was a player that I absolutely love, and I thought he's going to run the point for Eric Musselman. He's a 6'5" point guard. Their other two starting guards are both 6'7". St. Thomas was going to be an NBA prospect who's now not really an NBA prospect, and it looked like it was going to come together of like, this is a jumbo-sized team with a coach who's had a lot of success before. Why is everybody so down on USC? They're going to go out and do it. And they didn't. It did not happen. The roster continuity was non-existent. We saw some great players emerge. Wesley Yates was incredible for this team, especially in the second half of the year. He was awesome. And Desmond Claude was good. He really did have a good year. But I think the big issue for USC was that they didn't have any front court depth or really any physicality in the front court. Their size was just not really, they had big guards, but they didn't have any actual bigs, and it seriously impacted them this season. So shout out to the pollsters for having USC exactly 14th, because they were right. I was very, very wrong about this one. And even as USC rebuilds right now, it's funny. I think Kevin Sweeney tweeted this from Sports Illustrated, that like 4 or 5 of USC's 6 transfer additions are all like power forwards or higher or centers. Like Eric Musselman's swinging too far in the other direction, and he's just bringing in a bunch of bigs. So we'll see if it works in year 2 for him at USC. But it certainly didn't in year 1. Yeah,
it's interesting how a lot of first-year coaches really did have good success, right? We talked about the guys that were all part of that same coaching carousel on the back end that all made the Sweet 16 in BYU, Kentucky, and Arkansas. And USC, which was at not the front end, but right near the front end of that coaching carousel, did not go the same way. So we'll see if Bus can get it rolling like he previously had it, but right now it's not, Andy. And speaking of Gonzaga, it reminds me that I was 1 year too early on one of my bold predictions. You might remember last year I had a bold prediction that Gonzaga's Sweet 16 streak would end, and I got it wrong, thankfully for you. And I'm a Gonzaga fan, like, because you're a Gonzaga guy, so I want to cheer for my buddy. And unfortunately, I was a year too early, and that streak ended this year.
Yeah, there was incredible that they made it 2 years ago when they had to beat a bit of an undermanned Kansas team. But yeah, this year was always going to be tough with the 8 seed. But they put up quite a fight against Houston. But yes, 1 year early on that one. I don't think I'm going to be 1 year early on this USC prediction. But hey, you never know. Maybe I will be.
That would be crazy. Well, let's bookmark this and come back when they get top 3 in the Big Ten next year. Guys, thanks so much for being with us to kick off a brand new week of Locked On College Basketball. It's always fun to keep it going throughout the summer and throughout the offseason. Keep it locked here, whether you're headed to the beach or whatever you're doing this summer. We'd love to be the voice in your ear or the face on your TV. If you can bear to look at us, come hang out with us, even as we get ready for a brand new year with all the roster movement and all that great stuff. If you've not subscribed to Locked On College Basketball on YouTube, make sure you do that right now. If you've not joined the Discord, we'd love to see you in there hanging out with us at links in the show notes. As always, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Shouts to Mick Bruins. And until tomorrow's show, peace.